Okay, so this is going to be my first real programming video. Um, I decided to start with unit testing because it's something that I'm super interested in, and I feel like the iOS community doesn't do a lot of it. Um, I know in the web world, there's a lot of testing done with JavaScript, probably because JavaScript isn't a type safe language, so you need to add a lot more tests just to verify what you're doing is syntactically correct and things like that. With Swift, since it's a type safe language, we don't have to worry about a lot of those things, but that doesn't mean we should just not do any unit testing. So, um, these first few videos on unit testing are going to be what I consider to be like the bare minimum to get started. They're really simple things that can help make your project a lot safer. Specifically, these are unit tests for assets. So this would be images, storyboard files, nib files, colors, anything you're loading from the bundle. Um, just adding some tests can go a really long way. Um, and I'll demonstrate why with a very simple example here. So right now there's this app I created that has three tabs that are all loading images from the bundle. If you tap get soup, it loads an image and it has this button that would allow you to download the image, which would then show up in this downloads tab. In this example, it's not really doing that. It's just an example of a very basic app. So in the real world, when you create a complex app, you're going to have a ton of different images in your assets folder or however you want to load them, but you're going to have a lot of images and things change over time. So you might be removing features, adding new features, and things like that. So when it comes time to refactor and delete things, you might mistakenly delete something thinking it's not used anywhere, and then when you run the app and go to a specific screen, it might not look correct, or even worse, it might just outright crash. So I'll show a very basic example of this idea. So let's pretend that we have to remove the downloads tab because we're finding our users don't really care for it. When they tap this download button, it should just save to the device's camera or photo library. Um, because why would you really want to save it within the app? You could just save it to your phone. So our project manager says, okay, remove feature 3. So to free up some space in the app and make it smaller for our users, we'll delete the assets for feature 3. So we'll delete this folder and we'll remove the feature 3 tab. So if we run it now, everything is going to compile fine, everything's going to run, the app launches and everything. We could go between the tabs, everything's good, but as soon as we go to this detail page, our app crashes, and that's because we deleted this download image. So I've seen this happen a bunch of times where you go to refactor or clean up the app, remove things you don't think are needed, and then find out, oh wait, that was used somewhere and I had no idea. And unfortunately, you might not even know until it goes out to users and then there's a crash happening. So let's bring back the download image real quick, run it again, and it'll work. So the way that we can fix this is by creating a structure that will load our images for us. And it'll do this in a type safe way. And it'll be unit testable. So that means that we could run our unit tests, and if an image doesn't load, we immediately know that there's a problem. Instead of having to run the app, go to a specific screen and cause a crash or something, we run our unit tests, and if everything passes, then we know it's good to go. So to start, let's look at what our goal is. It's to have a structure called image asset that just loads an image and gives us back the UI image. So to start, I'll create a new folder for our assets. Call it resources. And then create a new file for the image asset. Gonna import UI kit since we're gonna be working with UI images. So start, we'll create our structure called image asset. And it'll have one static function called load. Just gonna take an asset value, which we don't know what that is, and return a UI image. So what I like to do is create an enum called raw image asset. And just have the cases be equal to the name of the image. So for our app, we have, I think, 4 images: the home, download, soup, and no soup image. So just add those now. I like using the enum because then if your image name is different than what you are calling it in the app, you can make the case value say home, even though the image is called house. So that's kind of nice. What were there? There's home, download, soup, no soup. Okay, so we'll do soup equals soup. All right, so now we need a way to actually get the image value. So we'll create a function called load, which will just return an optional UI image. So it'll be called named, and we'll use the raw values that we're defining here. So we'll just do self.raw value, and that'll return our optional image. So now in our image asset struct, we will use this raw image asset enum and just return the loaded image with the force unwrap. So force unwrapping is not a good thing to do generally, and we'll see why it's going to be safe to do this once we run our unit tests, or add our unit tests, I should say. So for now, this is still unsafe, but it's a bit better than working with raw string values. So let's refactor what we have here. And we'll now use that image asset instead of loading from strings. All right, and we could add our tab back here just to demonstrate what we're trying to fix. And then I think in the soup view controller, we also use images. All right, so if you run it, everything should work like it was before. We have our tabs, For some reason the third tab isn't showing. Oh, because I didn't add it. So now everything works just as it was before, except our image loading is a bit cleaner and a little bit nicer to work with instead of using raw string values. So let's see what happens if we recreate that same issue as before, where we delete our feature 3. So if we delete that and just hide that tab again, we're going to run into the same issue we had before. So even though we create the structure, we're still not getting, any information that image is actually missing until we try and force unwrap and we get a crash. So how can we fix this is by adding some unit tests that will just verify that our images are loading, so that we won't run into this issue later. So to start, create a new unit test. Unit test class. So we'll just call it image asset tests. Create a new one. So I'll probably make another video at some point going into more detail about unit testing, but this is like a good introduction to how unit tests can be helpful and really not even that complicated. Like these unit tests we're going to do here are super simple and will help us a lot. So you don't always have to go full sail into unit testing. You could just do what you need to start, and then as you get more into it, you can do more complex unit tests. So all we want to do is test that our images are loading. So one way we could do it is having individual tests for each image, which would get super annoying. So for example, we could have test, soup image loads. And we're just going to get the image from the raw image asset. So that's going to be soup.load. And then we want to assert that it's not nil. And we could do the same, for every single image in the app. But that would get really, really tedious. And that's kind of why people get sick of unit testing and don't want to do it. So for my example here, I'm just trying to show you a really easy thing you could add that's not gonna, have to be maintained over time. So for now, if we run these tests, let's see what happens. We don't need this one anymore, so I'll just delete that. We'll run these tests and see what happens here. All right, so these worked. Now let's try the download one. And then we get a failed test. So now instead of having to run the app, see the crash, or navigate a bunch of screens to see that an image is missing or causing the app to crash or something, we just run our unit test and we immediately know, okay, something got deleted that we needed. And as I said, this is kind of tedious. Right now there's only 4 images, so you could write out every single test, but as your app grows, it's going to be annoying and not really fun to do. So what I like to do is make my enum case iterable, which will basically take all the cases and create an array that you could loop over. So instead of having to do individual tests, I could just do one test that'll loop over all of the images and verify that they're loading. So test, say, images load. And then what we'll do is raw image asset dot all cases. I might have to build real quick to get it. Yep, all cases. We'll do a for each. So now I could get rid of these individual tests and just run this one test that'll loop over all of my assets. So if I run the test now, we get a fail, and it doesn't give us a lot of info. So what we could do is just add a message. Okay, so now we get our failure message that says we're unable to load the asset download. So had we had this earlier, we would have ran our tests and immediately known, okay, we deleted the download image, which is, needed somewhere. Or let's say we ran the test and we see, okay, download is, part of image assets, but we deleted the actual image, so let's just delete it from image asset and we should be good to go. So now if we build though, we do get a compile time failure because it's saying you're trying to use download in the soup view controller. So this is actually super helpful because now we know, oh, we deleted this image thinking we don't need it anymore, but this view controller is using it, so we can't delete that image yet. So if we go back to here, add this back, and now we build. And now we can run our unit tests again, make sure that it loaded. So now all our tests succeed, and if we build again, now we're able to build, and if we run it, everything runs, and we no longer get a crash. So I probably didn't do the best job explaining things here. I'm planning to do some more videos about this way of loading assets from the bundle, since these can fail. If you mistype things, if you delete things, all kinds of stuff could happen. So in this example, it's just images, which is a really easy thing to add. And the tests are so easy. You're just looping over an array. You don't have to add new test cases or remove test cases. It's all maintained by our enum that contains all our images. So I'm planning to do some more videos. I'll do it on nib files because that's another problem area. If you change the name of a nib file or delete it or something, you run into the same issues that you do with image assets. Same with storyboards and colors. So I'm planning to add some more videos about those unit tests, and then from there I'll probably move on to more complex unit tests that actually test functionality, not just loading things. So this is kind of how I got into unit testing, was just um, testing assets and making sure things load, because there's been a bunch of times where you're in a major, or not a major, a very big project, and there's a ton of different assets, and you have no idea, what is being used and what isn't. Especially if you weren't the one that wrote the code to begin with. It's very easy to delete things by accident that you had no idea were being used elsewhere. So by adding these simple unit tests, it makes it very easy to verify that all your assets are loading as they should be. So that's it for this video. I'll probably have another video coming up tomorrow.